The protagonist was stroking his cat Nick on the head, while complaining to him about his boring life, which also made no sense. The boy said that, despite everything, he finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel in the future. Thanks to the magic of the cat and his trading ability, the protagonist could get anything. The boy, who was fighting a ferocious, wild and huge tiger, was determined in this other world, climbing to the top. Some kind of energy shot through the air. The girl who was accompanying the cart felt that energy. The second girl turned to her, to Karina, noticing a strange reaction in her friend, and showed her concern in that way. Karina took off her hood and commented on her sensations, saying that it was a strange feeling. The protagonist started talking about himself. His grandfather, who had raised him after the death of his parents, had passed away. The protagonist lay on his bed, wondering if he would now be left alone forever. It had been just 2 hours since the funeral, and the other memorial procedures had ended. He was surprised that it had already been 10 days since his grandfather's death. He was reading a letter in which he, Sakura Dai, was rejected for a job after an exhaustive selection process. Disappointed by the news, the protagonist dropped his hand on the bed and relaxed the palm with which he was holding the phone, making it fly out. Dale began to remember the words of different people who had said negative and derogatory things to him, and those words weighed on him. It was also clear from them that the boy's life was sad. Her gloomy thoughts were interrupted when her cat jumped on her stomach. Still, Day wasn't completely alone. He had his own pet. The boy gathered courage and decided that, despite his bad mood, he had nowhere to go, so, after lunch, he would go out to look for a job. Suddenly, the protagonist noticed something. He remembered a small box. There were rings inside. The protagonist tried one on. It fit him perfectly. Nick took one of the rings, which Dai noticed. He told the cat not to touch the jewelry, and reached out to take the ring from her. Something magical happened. Surprised by what was happening, the protagonist narrowed his eyes. He found himself in an open field overlooking the mountains. Dai was stunned by what happened. He assumed that maybe it was all a dream. The boy looked again at the landscape of hills in front of him. Dai didn't know where he was or how he got there. Because of the stress, she hugged her cat Nick. The boy began to reconstruct the sequence of events, remembering what he was doing before moving. The first thing he remembered was that he was lying in bed. Then, that I was hungry. Now he did not feel any hungrier than a minute ago, so the protagonist concluded that little time had passed. Dai finally understood that maybe it all had to do with the ring he was wearing. Panicked, she started feeling her pockets and checking Nick's mouth. Then she started looking at the floor, wondering if the ring could have fallen off. His search was in vain. The ring was still on his finger, so the protagonist was sure that he could not lose it just like that. He wondered again if there was any connection between the ring and being there. He questioned whether what had happened could have triggered everything that was happening at that moment. Dai couldn't believe it, because that wasn't a manga or an anime. Then he understood. The protagonist began to realize that he was in another world. The wind made the grass rustle. He could feel the ground beneath his feet. Everything was really real, and the protagonist understood it. He exclaimed that, if he had found himself in another world, he must have a tricksy skill. Or so I hoped. Oops tried to open the statistics window. He closed his eyes while summoning the stats, and then started to open them slowly. His face was blank. Sitting down, dejected on the grass, he realized that he was in trouble. The cat Nick licked her cheek. The boy, in response, rhetorically asked if he didn't care about everything. Only then did Day notice that his cat was flying. Faced with this turn of events, the protagonist turned away from his own pet in fear. He turned to the cat and asked him how he had learned to fly. Jokingly, the protagonist asked his cat if perhaps he had acquired a cheating skill. Still in a bad mood, Day summed up everything that had happened to him, concluding that he would not survive in such a world. Then the protagonist realized that his cat, although he had a cheating ability, maybe it wasn't the only thing. He had to figure out what else his pet could do. And at that moment, a pop-up window appeared. Dai assumed that this window was a table with Nick's statistics, but the screen showed information about Dai himself. It said the boy had homeless magic as well as exchange and assessment skills. The protagonist was surprised by what he saw. His assumption was wrong, the tats that appeared were his. She was delighted to discover that he also had a cheating ability. However, although he knew what the evaluation skill meant, he did not understand the exchange skill. Nick was flying in circles around his master. Day applied the assessment skill, and a new screen appeared. This time it was the cat's stats. It turned out that Nick was stronger than the protagonist, because he possessed spiritual magic of earth, water, fire and wind. The boy considered it lucky that both he and his cat had obtained cheating skills. The protagonist saw no point in returning to Japan, so he decided to try to survive in the new world. To begin with, he wanted to find out what the evaluation skill was capable of. He stood in front of a tree, touching the trunk with the palm of his hand. Dai used the evaluation skill and learned the height of the tree, the width of its leaves, the number of leaves and other similar information. Everything turned out to be quite ordinary and unimportant. Now it was time to find out what the second skill meant, that of exchange. Dai tapped the icon on the screen. Something seemed to enter his head. The protagonist was stunned. He hit his head with his fist to react. He was stunned, and tried to understand what had just happened, while hugging his cat. Nick didn't like how uncomfortable he felt on his owner's arm, so he started protesting. Dai lowered his pet to the ground, apologizing. The boy apologized to his friend again, and asked him to stay still. He pointed his hand towards the tree. The tree began to disappear, moving to another dimension. There was only a shallow hole left where the tree used to be. Nick was confused by the disappearance of such a large plant. Day noticed her pet's bewilderment, and asked if it really seemed so unexpected to her. The protagonist asked his partner to look at the screen. Suddenly, the boy returned the tree to its place, which scared his cat into snorting. Nick jumped back to his master. The tree had returned to its place. The cat, angry with his owner, snorted at him. Dai apologized and asked him not to get angry. The protagonist decided to seriously test his skills and marked the tree again in some space. The saved tree became points. The protagonist thought intensely about shoes. The energy began to concentrate in the palm of his outstretched hand. New sneakers appeared. Day had achieved what he wanted. The protagonist was clearly satisfied with his trading ability. Now he could survive and even get rich. The boy's future looked more promising. Dai felt more motivated. Moved a few more trees to the storage area. The boy added a big stone next to the huge tree. Many icons of the saved objects could be seen on the screen. He exchanged several trees and stones for a chainsaw. It was an expensive object, but not the most expensive. Day decided to take it just to try. The boy was still hungry. Suddenly, his cat snorted, looking towards the forest. The boy, noticing his pet's reaction, asked Nick what was wrong. A large, heavy paw fell hard to the ground. Nick's hair stood on end, and Day was transfixed by what he saw. A huge black tiger was coming out of the forest to meet the two homeless travelers. Day found that fearsome tiger imposing. The predator roared so loudly that the two of them crouched down, and the boy's hands began to shake. The protagonist tried to get the animal into his warehouse, but it didn't work. It turned out that I had not been able to save birds and insects before either. Apart from the plants, their storage did not accept any living beings. He was in a difficult situation, as he did not have any weapon. He thought he should at least scare the beast, and came up with something. The protagonist decided that he should attack first, and kill the enemy without giving him a chance to counterattack. He tried to calm down by telling himself out loud that the tiger was still some distance away, so everything was fine. I needed to keep my distance because, in order to open the warehouse on time, I needed at least 100 meters. He had not been testing his skills in vain. The boy was holding his cat, hugging it against his chest. Nick snorted angrily and spread his claws. Day soothed her pet with words as the tiger inched towards them. Taking advantage of the moment, the protagonist activated his warehouse. The black tiger fell into the hole. Day was glad that the first part of his plan had worked. The next step was to summon a maritime cargo container. Then the boy invoked liquid nitrogen and remembered that it was a tiger trap. He exclaimed that it was all over now. The animal began to fall into the container filled with liquid nitrogen. With his claws, the tiger tried to hook himself to the metal walls of the trap. The beast fell into the pit with the trap. The protagonist sat down, surrounded by the vapor of liquid nitrogen, and watched with tension whether his plan had worked or not. Satisfied with his well-executed idea, Day turned to his cat Nick and asked him what he thought of his plan. I was about to say that it had been pretty easy when Nick growled. To the disappointment of the protagonist, something jumped out of the hole. The tiger had managed to escape from the trap and was now furious. The boy started to panic. He urgently needed a weapon with which to fight the beast. At that moment, the cat Nick snorted fiercely and started throwing water bullets. The tiger managed to dodge that surprise attack. The tree hit by one of the bullets lost a piece. Day deduced that this must be the spiritual magic of his cat. However, the tiger was still intent on attacking the protagonist. The boy desperately searched his inventory for something that could help him get out of that situation. He was planning to build a wall to protect himself. The protagonist was up to something. The tiger charged at him relentlessly. Day's knees were shaking, trying to do something about it. He slapped his leg. I had nowhere to run, but I was determined. In his mind, he called the tiger to attack, but if he did, it would be the end of the beast. The protagonist was surprised and perplexed when he noticed that he was starting to see the movements of the tiger in slow motion. The boy thought that maybe something was wrong with him, but he didn't have much time to think about it. So, immediately after, he attacked the tiger. A big rock fell on the beast. This time, the protagonist hoped that the attacking predator was really finished. Just in case, the protagonist, to make sure, used his skill, and was able to add the beast to his inventory. Day was still hungry, very hungry. He checked his surroundings again. The trap was ready, and I had provisions, as well as weapons and tools in case I needed them. Day opened the remote control screen. With the help of a quadcopter drone, he was able to see a car accompanied by people. After putting the device in storage, the protagonist was once again convinced that his trading ability was a total trap. She petted her cat, who was eating from a bowl, and told him that it was time for the first contact. On a clear day, two girls on horseback were walking along the trail. To their surprise, on the way they saw a traveler. It was Dai. He greeted the girls. One of them did not seem at all pleased to meet a stranger and asked if he was traveling alone. The protagonist replied that he was traveling with his animal. The second girl became interested in what she thought was a cat. Holding his very long cat in his arms, the boy wanted to check if it was really weird to see cats around. The second girl, the one interested in the pet, said that if they saw cats often, but never with such a long coat. The boy introduced himself, giving his name and that of his cat. The second girl took off her hood and also introduced herself. Her name was Alicia Arlen. Dai was confused, but then he concluded that the girl looked like a student. On the other hand, the attitude of the first girl aroused serious suspicions. The protagonist offered Alicia to pet her cat if she wanted. At that moment, a sharp sword appeared next to Dai's throat. The first girl ordered Alicia to move away and asked the boy again if it was really just him and his cat. The second girl apologized. Dai confirmed that it was just the two of them, and added that he was a merchant, loaded with all kinds of things. The protagonist explained himself mentally. He had invented the story of being a boy who had left his village to become a merchant. In his small bag there were many useful things and objects. The protagonist took out one to show the girls, a flashlight. He turned on the beam of light and pointed it upwards, illuminating his face from below. The first girl tensed up, but was surprised by what she saw. Alice, for her part, was puzzled, although interested. The first girl, who was standing in front of her partner, asked if the object was magic. Alicia denied it. She did not feel any magical energy. Internally, Day only confirmed his suspicions. Magic and magic objects existed in that world. That explained why he had a magic attribute in his stats. The boy left the flashlight on the ground and said the girls could take it. Alicia picked it up and used it the same way he did, lighting up her face from below. Once again, he confirmed that there was nothing magical about the object. The first girl couldn't believe it. Dai, curious, asked if it was just the two of them traveling. The protector, the first girl, was put on alert by that question. He put his hand on his sword and replied that he was accompanying Alice. The boy was scared, but still asked if he could join them to get to the nearest town or city. He also asked for the name of the escort. Alicia thought that a bad person wouldn't ask for something like that, but the protector kept finding Dai suspicious. To dispel doubts, the boy took off his belt with the gun and offered it. The escort didn't seem impressed. She said there was no point in taking off weapons she didn't know how to use. Dai didn't understand what he meant, so the girl explained it to him. It was evident from his hands that he did not know how to use either a bow or a knife. The protagonist, with a smile, honestly admitted that he had figured it out. The girl was puzzled by this reaction. Finally, the first girl gave herself, and agreed to accompany the protagonist to the main merchant. The boy was glad to hear it. It turned out that the escort's name was Karina. Alicia also agreed to help Dai. The protagonist thanked the girls for accepting, and extended his hand to shake it, but suddenly Nick jumped out of his arms. The cat rushed towards Alice. She was happy about that gesture, and began to caress him, calling him May by rubbing her cheek against him. Dai stood with his hand outstretched in the air. To hide the situation, he turned to Karina, still with his hand raised, and thanked her for her help. He didn't get to shake the girl's hand. She turned around, and warned him not to come within a meter. I couldn't let a magician get so close to them. The boy wondered why he was mistaken for a magician. The escort did not believe that a lone traveler did not have combat skills. Dai understood what he meant. The defender repeated that the boy could go with them, but to keep his distance. The protagonist noticed that the escort used a long sword. The girl noticed the change of tone in the merchant's voice. Dai did not see anything wrong with that, as he considered that they were the same age. Karina didn't care how to talk to the guy. She just warned him not to do anything that would force her to attack him. The girl still found him very suspicious. Suddenly, the flashlight in Alice's hands changed color, which surprised her very much. Dai was taken to a caravan of merchants. Karina got out of the carriage, and an older man followed her. He approached Dai, and asked if he had been escorted to the city of Karam. The boy and the man introduced themselves. The old man's name was Klaus Bertram. He was the caravan manager and head of the Bertram Company. The protagonist did not know how influential Klaus was, so he decided to be polite just in case. Dai said he had a bold proposal. Klaus asked what he could offer in return. The young merchant handed him a knotted bag in response. Klaus turned to his assistant. The latter understood, approached Dai, took the bag and handed it to Klaus. The man untied the bag, and, when he saw its contents, he was surprised. The boss of the company commented that the protagonist was either very generous or did not know the real value of the product. He honestly admitted that he did not know the price of such goods in that country. Klaus pondered. The novice trader explained that the price of a product can vary depending on the place and time. And although that product was grown in Daichi's country, it was still valuable and rare. Klaus noticed that the protagonist was quite honest. The boy explained that he was a merchant, and that lying did not give him a good reputation. The head of the company agreed with him. Dai was glad that everything was going well, and thanked him loudly, saying that his grandfather had taught him to behave like this. Klaus, impressed by her sincerity, decided to answer her with the same honesty. In his country, pepper was very valuable, probably more than in Daichi's homeland. No country on the continent had managed to grow pepper seeds, and only aristocrats and rich people could import it. He also explained something that the protagonist did not like at all. The pepper trade required a permit. And since Dyer was a foreigner, Klaus assumed he didn't have it. But what bothered the protagonist the most was that the local people realized that he was not even from that continent. From the looks of him, it was easy to deduce. Dai admitted he was an outsider and asked not to be revealed. Klaus replied that hiding it could bring problems for both of them. He stopped his assistant with a gesture. The protagonist was grateful for the warning. The head of the company proposed to estimate the price of pepper, but the young merchant asked to wait. He asked Klaus if he wanted to buy him something else. Daichi was thinking about becoming a merchant in that country, even if he wasn't a native, so he asked Klaus for help. The head of the company again said that the protagonist was honest, to which Dai simply replied that he just wanted to see the good in people. Klaus also frankly told her that it would not help Daya to become a merchant like that just because. The young man asked him directly how much pepper he wanted. Klaus held up 3 fingers in response. The protagonist thought to himself that it was naive to expect the boss to selflessly help him. He handed her 3 more bags of pepper, leaving Klaus satisfied. Vale explained that the business partner should always be treated with respect. That was how his grandfather had taught him. Actually, the protagonist was lying, he had read it in a book. The head of the company ordered his assistant Lloyd to take the pepper, and then turned to Karina, instructing her to continue escorting Alicia and take a day to Kung City. Klaus asked if Alicia agreed to this arrangement, and the girl replied that she had no problem. The chief and his assistant returned to the carriage. Go thanked Klaus for his help as he left. Karina bowed her head with a gentlemanly bearing, and said that she would accompany the protagonist. Alicia made a bow and said she would go with them too. They left together for somewhere. Day asked where they were going. Alicia explained that they were heading towards the head of the escort. The guy thought about it, and turned to her, asking her not to treat him so formally, and to consider him a friend. Alicia wanted to reply, but the protagonist immediately distracted her with the help of his pet, whom he introduced as his companion, and whom the girl found adorable. Day looked at Nick, and Nick looked at Day. The boy shouted that the cat was happy and very cute, just before he fell out of his arms. Alicia managed to catch him. Satisfied, she began to hug him. The guy decided to joke with her, telling her that she was hugging Nick, not Day. The protagonist smiled, and a bewildered Alice blushed. The girl turned away embarrassed. The boy asked her if she was going to continue with the cat in her arms. Timidly, Alicia said yes. The protagonist decided to keep bothering her, approaching her and telling her that he had not heard her. Bewildered, Alicia screamed and ordered them to get going. Embarrassed, she repeated Dai's name. The boy kept looking down at the confused Alice. Suddenly, Nick got angry. The camp set up by the caravan of merchants was silent. Sitting at the table inside his store, Closer asked Joyce for her opinion on Dai. The assistant gave his assessment. He said that the boy spoke his language too well to be a visitor, he was polite and, by his clean hands. It was noticeable that he had never worked, he must come from a well-to-do family, and have a good education. The head of the company had also noticed the same thing, so he asked her opinion about the pepper resting on the plate. Joyd concluded that this species had been given as a token of appreciation, and that D was either the son of a rich merchant, or the dumber son of an aristocrat. Klaus concluded that the boy could become someone important in the future. He also assumed that D had some kind of warehouse, since the product was so well preserved. It turned out that storage was a rare skill bestowed by God. Its owner could store objects there for a long time, because time stopped inside, and the ability depended on the owner's magical power. A magic bag, on the other hand, was a bag whose capacity was increased by magic. Its space was limited, it did not depend on the magical power of the owner, and the time inside did not stop. Klaus realized that Day had only pretended to take the goods out of a magic bag, when in reality, he had crossed the sea with their storage. The older man commented that the boy was clearly very young. The head of the company decided that they needed to find out if there were any valuable items in their warehouse. But first, they had to know which country the boy came from. Joyd asked if he should stop being rude to Da, to which Closer replied no. The boss ordered him to warn the guards and employees that they should be polite to Day, and not just those of the company. Nick yawned in Alicia's arms. Karina, Day and Alicia were walking around the camp. One of the merchants was showing another an expensive crystal glass. The apprentice merchant noticed that and thought that, even if the video was of average quality, a crystal glass in that world was still an expensive object. Someone called Karina by name. It turned out to be a girl named Korit, who was asking the guard for help in lighting the fire. Karina apologized to the little girl, she couldn't help her, she had to escort Dai. The boy did not understand why they needed Karina to light a fire, and assumed that maybe the girl did it with magic. Dai, curious, directly said that he wanted to see Karina light the fire. The girl replied that she agreed if he wished. Karina leaned over to the stove. Runt thanked him for agreeing to help. The Escol rhetorically asked if it was difficult to light a fire with flint. The girl put out her hand, and immediately the flames were ignited. Dai was impressed by the scene. He also understood that it was about spiritual magic. In addition, he noticed that although Nick's offensive magic was also impressive, he was surprised by how people used magic in everyday life. Day asked Karina if she always helped to light the fire. She replied that only when she was not busy. The boy suggested that, in that case, those who could not control fire magic did it with flint. Alicia corrected him, explaining that people who did not master fire magic, but if other types of magic, could use fire artifacts. Day clarified if he understood correctly, that anyone could use magic items regardless of the type of item, as long as he had magic power. Alicia confirmed, but added that that was not all. He explained that a person's magical prowess influenced the work they could do, and that those who possessed magic were hired more easily than those who did not. People without magic power couldn't even use Moderna facilities and barely managed to survive. Day understood it well. He began to remember his life in his native country, where his grandfather had died and he had no job. He remembered unpleasant people, bad news and other hardships of his life. The protagonist came to a sad conclusion. The quality of life depended on magic. Karina looked at him sternly, and only then the boy realized that 'twas next to him. He understood that I had said it out loud. The protagonist apologized to the girl. Kayret accepted her apology, she was already used to it. The girl said that even if she didn't have magic, she worked in a good company, where everyone was kind and helped each other. I knew perfectly well that I was lucky. Dai took his words seriously. He understood that thanks to his skill, he had been able to become a merchant, but that at heart it was a selfish idea. The protagonist looked at his hand. With that ability, he could help people who didn't have magic. He decided that it would be interesting to shake the foundations of that world. Dai reasoned that people without magic could live just as well as those who did, and that if he spread common objects and knowledge, non-magicians would treat him with appreciation. I knew it was just a fantasy, but now I had a lot of motivation. He turned to Cord and handed him a lighter, calling it a fire-making device. He showed her how to use the device, which surprised everyone. It was the first time Karina had seen such a small magic artifact. Alicia objected that the object did not look like a magical artifact, and the companion added that it was transparent, like a jewel. Cora agreed, yes, it looks like a gem. Dai called it a lighter and handed it to the girl. She protested strongly, saying that she could not accept something so expensive. The lighter slipped from the guy's fingers and fell to the floor without breaking, which amazed the girls. The protagonist reassured her, assuring her that the device was quite resistant, and that even if she broke too, she would not get angry. He asked Korit not to worry and try to use it. Taking a bunch of dried herbs, the girl lit it with the device and placed the burning herbs between the logs. The wood caught fire. Korit couldn't believe such an amazing artifact existed, and said that Day's homeland must be wonderful. The protagonist openly stated that he wanted people without magic in that country to be able to use magic artifacts. The girl asked him if he was a foreign trader. With a smile, he told her that with such amazing tools, he would certainly succeed. Carrick thanked Jay, returned the lighter, and the boy said that he should thank her for listening to him, apologized for interrupting his work, and told her that she could keep the device. She turned around to continue with her escort, but surprised by the young merchant's decision, Carrot asked him to stop. I couldn't accept something so expensive. The protagonist insisted that it was not so expensive. Someone asked what Karina was doing there. The one who spoke turned out to be the head of the escorts. She replied that she was going to see him. Dee was surprised by how huge the man was. Karina introduced her captain, Jeffrey, to the protagonist, explaining that he was Bertram's business partner, and introduced Day to Jeffrey as an escorted merchant. In honor of the meeting, the boy held out his hand to her, saying that he would be with them until the next city. Jeffrey personally introduced himself to the protagonist. Karina explained to the captain that Mr. Bertram had asked her to keep an eye on Ade. Jeffrey confirmed with his subordinate that then, Karina was escorting two people, Alicia and Dai. The guardian nodded. The protagonist was irritated to learn that they said that Karina was taking care of both of them, probably on purpose. Jeffrey invited Mr. Okura to join him. They set off. The captain offered Dai a drink, but he refused. They left a confused correspondent behind. Finally, the boy ate something. The protagonist was lying in his tent, with his cat curled up on his belly. While petting her pet, Dai commented on how surprised people were by the plastic lighter. Remembering how he was compared to a jewel, he began to worry if he had overstepped the mark. But he couldn't keep thinking about it. They called him. It was Karina, who apologized for disturbing him so late, but the head of the company wanted to meet with the young merchant. Day agreed to go to the meeting. He decided to hide the watch with which he had checked the time recently, fearing that it might cause problems for him. He left the store accompanied by Karina. He noticed that the camp was quite lively. People were looking at him, which puzzled him. Karina invited the protagonist to enter the store, where Alicia was already sitting at the table, and Chloe was standing next to her, offering the guy an empty chair. The head of the company also sat down, and apologized for disturbing him at such a late hour. He was straight to the point, and asked what was wrong, adding that if there were any problems with the products, he could change them. Closer rejected the offer because the product was excellent. Then the protagonist wanted to know what it was about. It turned out that Bertram wanted to talk about the lighter. The boy immediately recognized it as the object he had given to Corrid. Klaus was quick to clarify that he had not taken it from the girl. She had simply wanted to consult about a magical artifact that she had never seen before. The head of the company earnestly asked the young merchant if he understood the true value of the object. Dai was puzzled by the question. I was thinking of selling the lighter. Sure, but only as a household appliance. Klaus explained that this artifact could be used by aristocrats and the rich, and that, although it was not worth much in Day's country, it was extremely expensive there. The boy asked if the lighter was considered a simple device, to which the boss shook his head. The man explained that, precisely because it could be used by people with no knowledge of magic, it was more valuable than an ordinary magical artifact. There was also another detail, the lighter housing, which could be sold at the price of glass, or even a piece of jewelry. Upon hearing that, the protagonist recalled how, the other day, he had seen two people arguing over a very expensive crystal glass. Klaus went on to explain the nuances of the matter, saying that when such objects came to the market, there were always those who tried to sell them to aristocrats or wealthy nobles. Dai understood that, if that happened, he could get into a big mess. The young merchant sincerely admitted that he had not thought about it. The head of the company promised to help him, but asked him what he would do now. The protagonist reflected on his answer, thinking about how to protect himself and come forward without losing his edge, and that he would not be able to shake the foundations of that world as he wanted. Then he remembered that crystal glass, and an idea popped into his head. He said that he had actually tried to sell this object before to aristocrats and rich people. Dai took out a crystal rose and showed it to Klaus and Alicia. The girl was impressed by the beauty of the object, and the head of the company even exclaimed in surprise. The protagonist again wondered if he had not crossed the line. Chloe noticed something. He shouted for someone to stop and take their time. Alice also exclaimed in fright. Dee didn't understand the reason for those reactions. He hadn't noticed the leaf that was next to his neck. Only when he looked down did he see Karina's sword pointed at his throat. Klaus intervened, and explained to the guard that nothing was wrong, that he had simply been surprised. The girl pulled the sword away from Daichi's neck, sheathed it and apologized. The head of the trading company was embarrassed by what happened, and asked for forgiveness for having raised his voice. The guy remembered Karina's warning, and wondered if the subway condition had been met. Since the escort had appeared in the store in an instant, Go assured Klaus that everything was fine. Karina was just protecting them. The old man noticed that the protagonist had not even moved when the sword was pointed at him. The boy explained that he knew that Karina would not hurt him. In reality, Day had simply not understood what was happening, and had not seen the sheet in time. But it was better that the others did not know. The head of the company proposed to continue the conversation, and the protagonist asked if Karina could join now. The boy was terrified by what had happened, and did not want it to happen again. Chloe agreed, since Dee asked for it. The boss asked Karina to step back a little. The girl obeyed. The man was ready to get back to business. The young merchant began to explain that this rose was a crystal sculpture. She was so beautiful that any jewel was below her. Clausen didn't think it was the same glass he normally saw. He and Alice admired the beauty of the rose together. Dai took a few more items out of his bag, and placed them on the table, among them lighters and glass figurines. The head of the company was mesmerized by the beauty of the objects, noticing that they even shone differently. Closer realized that the body of the lighters was different from the glass used by the dye masters, but still, some would try to sell them at a higher price. The young merchant said that he wanted to solve the problem with money, and earn something by selling crystal objects. I was planning on doing it by using the lighters as a free item with the main purchase. The protagonist had decided to give a lighter as an artifact for everyday life to whoever bought an expensive glass object, and then distribute them among rich people. The head of the company clarified, whether he had understood correctly, that D planned to distribute lighters in the market. Klaus didn't think it was a good plan, but since there was no other idea, he agreed to do it according to the young merchant's method. Dai asked if that meant the man was willing to cooperate with him. The head of the company confirmed his consent. The boy thanked him and held out his hand. Clothes and dice held her close. This was the first step of a novice trader. The protagonist, Karina and Alicia left the store. They walked around the camp, and the escort apologized for what happened. Alicia assured her friend that everything was fine. They also wanted to support Karina, saying that everything had happened because of her, since Klaus had been very surprised, and that the girl was just doing her job, so he should apologize. Alicia wanted to discuss it, but she didn't finish the sentence. An uneasy air floated between the three that annoyed Day. Determined to ease the atmosphere, the boy turned to Alice and distracted her with the help of a cat. She took Nick in her arms, and the cat's front paws brushed the girl's cheeks. Day knew that would cheer her up. It was too easy. The boy openly told Alicia that he liked it better when she smiled. The girl blushed. He smiled and asked if that was the kind of smile he wanted to see. The protagonist added that Alicia was also shy and adorable. The girl was confused. Karina, who was watching the whole scene, felt uncomfortable with the conversation. Dai changed the subject and asked the girls because everyone at the camp was looking at him so much. Karina explained that it was all because the protagonist had given Kurt a lighter. The boy asked if that meant that the others also wanted the same artifact. The escort did not deny it, but added that they also wanted to know what kind of person Dai was and talk to him. Karina went on to explain the behavior of the people at the camp, saying that they imagined different reasons for the young merchant's visit. Dai, after hearing all the versions, joked with the guard that he had a good opinion of them. The girl corrected him, what they had was a good imagination. Alicia noticed something. There was a commotion in the distance. People were running from the forest, asking for help, and shouting that they were being chased by monsters. The trio, Dai, Karina and Alicia, went on alert. One of those fleeing was shouting loudly that a herd of king monkeys was heading to Alger. Karina took a step forward and ordered Alicia and Dai to hide behind her. The crazed eyes of the king monkeys glowed in the darkness. The escort kept his sword ready. Fugitives were screaming about the real monkeys at the top of their lungs. The whole camp heard them. The captain immediately ordered to form an interception line. The escorts quickly gathered, preparing for battle. Those who escaped fell to the ground. The defenders were fully armed. They stood with their shields up and their spears forward. Dechi observed everything. He asked the girls who those real monkeys were. Karina explained that they were a kind of large ape-like monster. They were not only smart enough to hunt in a group, but also fast. The protagonist asked the escort if she wanted to join the defense line. The girl replied that, for now, her duty was to protect him and Alicia. Bale assured that she shouldn't worry about him, that she'd better concentrate on protecting Alicia. However, the girl could not leave her homework, so she asked the guy not to interfere with her work. The escort turned to Alice, reminding her that she could use non-elemental magic, and asked her not to forget the physical reinforcement and stealth spells. The boy heard Karina's words and learned about the kind of magic that non-elemental magicians could use. The protagonist thought about stealth and assumed that, if both used the same system, then only the object could be enchanted. Dai wondered if he could do it too. Alice noticed that the king monkeys were approaching. Noises were heard from the forest. The monsters jumped out of the forest, roaring fiercely. The captain of the escort ordered defenders to relax the bow strings. The archers started shooting at the beasts. The monkeys were in the air, jumping. The arrows were heading towards them. They understood that they could not dodge them when they were in the air, and thought that would finish them. The archers kept firing. The protagonist was shocked to see that the arrows did not cause any damage to the real monkeys. The captain ordered the following attacks to be magical. The magicians cast different spells towards the monsters. The monkeys were startled and screamed loudly. Alice watched, bewildered. The other monkey kings were still itching to fight. One of them was arrested after crashing his head into a shield. The monsters ran into the resistance of the shields. Dai asked if the escorts were okay. Karina assured him that yes, they could withstand attacks of that level. Then something suddenly caught his attention. Reinforcements of monkey kings had arrived from the south. The captain encouraged his men by saying that they were stronger than them. The protagonist thought about what decision to make, since he could just observe, but he wanted to help. He didn't want to show his strength. He also asked Nick to hide and not use magic. Dagi looked at his inventory, not knowing what to choose. Alicia noticed it, and looked at him incredulously, as she could not see her screen. Karina commented that the situation was strange, because the activity of the real monkeys was suspiciously intense. The escort ordered Alicia to find out if they were hiding in the south of the forest. Dai felt something and looked away. Alice closed her eyes and concentrated on her spell. The protagonist looked towards the forest, and saw the king monkeys approaching there. He shouted immediately, warning Karina that they were approaching from the eastern fields. The monsters were fast. The protagonist noticed this and urgently thought that he needed a gun. One of the monkeys pointed at Dai. But Karina immediately appeared next to the monster. With his sword, he deflected the attack, but two other monkeys were already running in another direction. Both the guard and the boy saw him. This time, the monsters were heading towards Alice. Dai was afraid for the girl. He suddenly pushed himself up from the ground, not knowing how. His foot flew straight into the attacking monkey's face. The monster turned his gaze towards the protagonist, but it was already too late. Dai punched the monkey in the lower jaw. The monster flew violently to the side, rolling from the impact. The second monkey turned to the protagonist. The boy headbutted him in the face. The monkey lost consciousness, and was also thrown out by the force of the blow. Karina and Alicia were stunned by what they saw. The protagonist, unable to control his strength, dragged his body along the ground by inertia. What a piece of shit lying on the floor. The sorceress and the escort became concerned about the merchant's condition. The protagonist raised his head, still lying down. He turned to Alicia and asked her if she was hurt. The girls helped Dai up, and the three of them rushed out of the place. However, two other monkeys decided to attack them from behind. Karina and the protagonist felt it and turned around. Dai and the guard confronted the monsters. Karina attacked with her sword and the boy kicked. Alice, who was somewhat out of the way, was watching their fight, but there was another real monkey right behind her. The sorceress did not notice it immediately, but she felt something and looked without moving. He panicked when he saw the monster showing his fangs. Dai immediately ran to help her, which Karina caught a glimpse of. The boy managed to receive the blow of the real monkey on his own body. Alicia was really scared about Dai. Karina was also worried. The monster clung to the shoulder of the protagonist. He found it difficult to bear it, but he had no intention of giving up. Although he was worried about dying if the situation did not improve, he tried to convince himself that he was not feeling pain, and to his surprise, Dai really wasn't feeling it. The king monkey that was clinging to his shoulder was also perplexed by not being able to bite him. The protagonist remembered how before Karina and Alicia had talked about non-elemental magic or magic without improvised means, and understood that, in all probability, that was what was happening. He also recalled his encounter with the huge tiger, whose movements he had seen in slow motion. Dai decided to take advantage of his advantage and pulled out a knife from his belt, which wrapped with an aura. The merchant stabbed the monkey king in the back. Seeing the result of his attack, the protagonist concluded that it was like sticking a fork in a piece of cake. Physical strength and stealth were really powerful abilities. Dai's attention was diverted to Karina, who was struggling with another monkey. The boy used his physical strength and shouted at the escort to leave it to him to take care of the monster. The protagonist jumped up and plunged the knife back into the king monkey's back. Dai also used stealth. The monster roared with rage and pain. However, the boy's knife was small and did not reach the monkey's heart. The monster was stirring furiously, something that of course the protagonist did not like at all. The knife slipped out of the wound. Without waiting for it, Dai saw himself falling into the void. The monkey smiled mockingly at the boy's failure, but he was not discouraged either. He was smiling slightly. Karina, with a firm and focused gaze, struck a precise blow with her long sword, surprising the monkey king. The blade went completely through it. The monster was defeated. The escort let out a gust of blood as she executed her cuts. Karina's face was stained red. Dale found that image of the girl attractive. The boy fell to the ground again. Alicia and Karina ran to him, worried. The protagonist asked if they were injured. Nick poked his head out from under his t-shirt. Instead of answering, the escort replied that she should be the one to ask that, and the sorceress added that Dai should have taken better care of herself. The girls helped the boy to get up. He asked about the state of the defensive line. Karina reported that the number of enemies was decreasing, and that, if it continued like this, they would win. The protagonist offered to help the defenders. The escort reminded him again that his duty was to protect Alicia and Adai. He frowned as he remembered how the young merchant had protected the sorceress from the attack of the Monkey King. Karina tightened her grip on the hilt of her sheathed sword, noticing her own tension. The girl explained that the monkeys' plan to break through the defense had failed, and that due to the drop in their morale, they would soon retreat. The protagonist asked if the Monkey Kings were really that smart. Dee got the answer when he looked towards the shield line and saw how the monsters were really starting to retreat towards the forest. Karina, already without blood on her face, turned to the boy more than once, asking if the young merchant was already convinced of his words. The boy seemed to ignore her, thinking only that, without blood on her face, the escort was even cuter. Dai looked down at his hands and saw blood on them. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small rolled-up towel. Alicia asked him to give it to her. The sorceress soaked the cloth in water and wrung it out to remove the excess. He started to wipe Dai's face. He exclaimed that she was cold, and added that he could have cleaned himself, but Alicia insisted on helping him as a sign of appreciation. In the end, the protagonist allowed him to do it. She was rubbing both of his cheeks with the wet towel, and you could tell by his expression that he was delighted. Dai asked the sorceress if she used spiritual water magic. Faced with Alicia's confused reaction, the boy decided to clarify if he had said something wrong. She was surprised that the merchant knew that he could use spiritual water magic. Dai, in turn, was puzzled. The sorceress thought about how to explain it to him. Alice blurted out a flood of information about the workings of magic, its types, which ones were stronger, and how the magical artifacts operated. From his words, the boy deduced that there were 4 main elements, and that spiritual magic was more powerful than artifacts. The sorceress still did not understand how the merchant had realized that she used spiritual magic. Dai thought about how to lie. Hesitating, he replied that he was just being polite. He explained that in his country, spiritual magic was valued more than artifacts, so he had come to that conclusion. In fact, it would be rude to call something like that an artifact, since they are not that valuable. That's why the protagonist had said that it was spiritual magic. Alicia and Karina shot him a stern look. The boy felt embarrassed. The escort explained that in her country, only 20 people could use spiritual magic, and that in the entire continent there were 100. The boy thought they were very few. The sorceress laughed a little, saying that a novice merchant should learn more about his country before starting a business there. The protagonist replied that he would be glad to be told everything while traveling. The girls agreed to help Daichi, and Dai happily thanked them. As a sign of gratitude, he offered to sell them to figurines with their shapes, but both rejected the offer. The warriors of the escort were happy for the victory. Dai asked if they could approach the defense post. Karina replied that maybe they were injured, and that the protagonist could help them. The boy also asked the reasons for the attack of the real monkeys. The escort had some suspicions, but she said it would be better to ask those who had fled from the monsters. The protagonist drew a couple of conclusions for himself. The first was that spiritual magic was rare in that world. The second, that he could call Nick spiritual magic if he came to use his own elemental magic. Besides, if someone discovered his trading ability, he might have problems, so he had to use it carefully. The boy smiled with resignation. It seems that surviving was not so easy, even with Cheta skills. Alicia remembered the moment when Dai, bruised, had lifted a finger and said that everything was fine. The girl blushed and called him a funny person. The sorceress thought the merchant was kind. Besides, I've never heard of anyone defeating a king monkey without a weapon. Alicia relived in her mind the moment when the protagonist covered her with his body. I didn't understand why Dai had done something like that, I also didn't understand why the boy was smiling in such a dangerous situation. You can't beat a king monkey in one fell swoop. But Alice remembered well how her grandmother used to tell her about the hero when she was a child. The girl hid her head under the blanket. There he strongly denied, muttering no. She thought that, even so, Dane was not afraid of her, and that even after discovering that she possessed spiritual magic, he had not changed the way he treated her. She remembered how others had judged her, and then the boy's warm smile. She felt confused. He curled up on the blanket like a caterpillar. Karina was upset and surprised that the aspiring merchant did not know how to ride a horse. He corrected her. It wasn't that I didn't know, but that I had never ridden one. At the end, the protagonist got into the carriage accompanied by Karina and Alicia. I wasn't happy with the jolts, but according to the escort, it was the best carriage they could get. The protagonist looked out of the carriage window. The warriors accompanying them immediately looked away. It depressed him that everyone avoided looking at him. For Karina, that was a normal thing. The protagonist did not understand when he had managed to become so scary. The escort replied that it had been the night before, when everyone was talking about their favorite foods. Karina explained that although people had stopped talking about the lighter, there was still a reason for misunderstandings. It turned out to be Dai's tent, or rather the strange light coming out of it. The boy justified himself by saying that in his country this was something common. Karina demanded that the next time she showed products from her land, she should notify them and the main trader first. The protagonist apologized and assured that he would remember it. Alicia, curious, asked what products they were talking about, and asked him to show them to her. The boy offered to show them the inside of his store if they wanted to see it. The girl turned very red at the suggestion. The protagonist realized at that moment what he had said, remembering that Alicia was a minor. Dai apologized and retracted, explaining that the sorceress was too young. Alice was disappointed to hear that she was too small. Karina turned to the guy and told him that it was rude to say something like that. It turned out that the sorceress was 20 years old. The protagonist was shocked by this information. Karina added that she was 19, and that they were both older than him. Dai flatly objected to such a statement, since he was 22. The escort didn't seem to mind, but the sorceress just laughed. Young people today can't wait to grow up, he said. The protagonist was frustrated that girls thought he was 16 or 17. Karina teased him, saying that was a nice compliment, and Alicia apologized. However, the guy had also confused the girl's age at first. The escort suggested ending that conversation. A mounted escort was leveling the ground in the open space. Day was looking out the window when something caught his eye. He saw men tied up in an uncovered cart. Karina noticed where the protagonist was looking, and told him that he should not feel compassion. Daichi considered it cruel. It turned out that a group of 35 people had entered the forest to capture young king monkeys. Out of such a large team, only 5 adventurers survived. The boy asked why they needed the pups. Alicia replied that they were used for that purpose, and Karina added that they were also used in the army. The escort further explained that captured royal monkeys were fitted with slave collars. The protagonist felt uncomfortable with such an object. Dai asked if monkey pups were expensive. Karina talked about the prices. Thus, it turned out that 1 gold coin was equivalent to 1 million yen, according to the exchange rate of his ability. The protagonist kept asking questions. I wanted to know if those adventurers were criminals. The escort explained that it was a delicate matter, but that they would have to take responsibility for yesterday's battle. They would be fined, and if they could not pay, they would become debt slaves. Dai concluded that being adventurous was not profitable at all. However, it turned out that Karina herself was an adventurer. The protagonist apologized to her, and the girl explained that, if one works with perseverance, the business can be quite lucrative. The adventurers of the carriage were simply unlucky, as they were attacked by 2 packs at once. Alicia added that, in any case, they had not done a good investigation. From what they were saying, he deduced that those adventurers hadn't even checked to see if their team members were still alive. Dai commented out loud that the world was tough. Alicia and Karina were puzzled. The protagonist discovered that if one approached a girl using physical magic, it was considered rude. He concluded that the culture and customs of that country were different from his own. Alicia thanked the boy for his efforts, and Karina warned the sorceress not to praise him too much. Day proposed to pause, and started rummaging through the bag Klaus had given him. He took out water and sandwiches wrapped in plastic. The protagonist offered the sandwiches, and invited the girls to try them. Dai also offered them some Japanese dishes for them to taste. He sincerely asked them to be honest, as he was interested in their opinion. It turned out that the boss of the company had given the protagonist a bag, so that he could hide its storage. The boy took the food out of his inventory, so everything was fresh. Oops, he started to eat, opening the food wrapper, but before he could do it, he exclaimed something about what he saw ahead. The protagonist turned his gaze towards the street. They were approaching the village of Tekura. The boy tried to see him, but from where he was sitting, he couldn't make out anything. Day decided she needed to have lunch soon. He said that a plastic water bottle was a container with a special transparent wrapping, like the one on the sandwich, and that he did not show it to just anyone. Karina said that calmed her down. The protagonist did not understand why, but thanked the girl. As they were going to rest for about an hour, Day suggested taking a walk around the village. Alicia supported the idea. The escort did not object, but first advised to eat in the carriage first, as she also needed to see what the village was like. After lunch they would walk, not on the outskirts, but in the center. The village was big, and Karina thought it was more important for a novice trader to know different cultures than landscapes. They could also buy shoes and clothes there. After saying this, the escort looked at Dai. The boy understood, it was too flashy. She accepted Karina's plan, and asked Alicia if it was okay for her to do the same. The sorceress had no problem. The guard thanked Day. She was glad that they had returned to their destination. The guy felt very uncomfortable when he saw Karina's reaction. She decided to take up the subject again by asking how long the manager would be away. Karina estimated that she would be back in about 15 or 20 minutes. With that in mind, Day decided that he and Alicia would wait for the guard in the carriage. The caravan stopped. The protagonist and the sorceress remained seated inside. There was also Nick, who jumped from the seat. The cat jumped up to Alice, which made the girl very happy. She started playing with him. Nick managed to catch the girl's hand. Dee was watching. The sorceress continued to play with Nick, saying that this time she would not be able to catch her. She sped up her movements, but Nick was still trying to reach her hand. He managed to brush Alicia's wrist with his paw. After that, the girl decided to increase the speed even more. Nick was chasing the sorceress's hand quickly, trying to catch her. Seeing Alicia's speed, the guy realized that not only Nick, but also the girl, had a physical strength booster. Day found it hard to believe what he was seeing. While the cat was chasing the hand, the sorceress managed to catch it with both hands. Alicia picked up the cat, and asked if Nick knew how to use the physical strength enhancement. The owner of the cat understood that his pet had been discovered. The protagonist turned to the girl with complete seriousness, and asked her to keep what she had seen a secret between the two. Alice repeated the question, between them. The girl said, if Dai said so, then yes. The two looked at each other with a slight blush on their cheeks. Dai and Alicia repeated each other's names. Nick grunted. The scene was interrupted by the return of Karina. The sorceress greeted her escort. The protagonist commented that Karina had returned quickly. The defender looked at him sternly. He announced that they would be staying in the village for 2 days. Dai was surprised by the decision. The boy asked if anything had happened. Karina explained that the damage caused by the real monkeys was greater than they thought. The caravan was in need of repairs. The carriage could not move forward either, so the travelers would have to stop and rest there for the time being. The escort proposed to have lunch, pointing to Dai's bag. The boy asked her if she wanted a sandwich. The defender confirmed it, and the protagonist, seeing Karina's happy smile, recalled the night before, with her holding a bloody sword. The boy took out the sandwiches and the water bottles again. The girls marveled at such an unusual food, and asked how it was eaten. Day explained that it was just bread, that it was enough to take a bite of it. Karina was surprised at how soft the bread was. He took a bite. The defender was delighted with the taste. Karina told Alicia that there were 2 whole slices of bread, and, in the middle, meat. The sorceress also decided to try foreign food. He admired the taste and texture of the sandwich. Alicia thought it was delicious. Karina noticed that it also had vegetables inside. Because the guard liked it so much, Dai offered her another sandwich. The girl was delighted to accept him, thanked him and was happy. Everything the protagonist had in his hands was taken immediately. He put his hand back in the bag. Now he took out the desserts, which included sliced fruit that Karina could recognize. Alice noticed the sweet aroma. Nick also asked to eat. They started taking food out of the bag for him. He put it in a bowl, and the cat began to eat. Alice tried to pet the cat, but her hand was pushed away by a paw. He understood that Nick didn't want to be disturbed. The sorceress laughed at the cat's behavior. Karina took a bite of the Japanese fruit sandwich. The guard was amazed by the taste. Day asked her for her opinion on the dessert. The escort asked what it was that he had in his hands. She was sweet and gentle. The boy explained that it was whipped cream, and that the girls liked it. Karina exclaimed that it was delicious, and that, of course, it would be popular. The protagonist asked her if she wanted more. But the girl wanted to know if the novice trader was sure if it wouldn't be a problem for him. Day secretly found Karina's reactions funny. He loudly suggested that she try other desserts with cream. The manager gladly accepted. The boy was touched by Karina's cheerful face. The girls ate the sandwiches with gusto. Dai was glad that they enjoyed. All the food disappeared. The guard worried about whether the food was expensive, to which the protagonist, with delight, asked if he really seemed like someone who cares about money. Karina was confused, and was glad about her small victory. He remembered when he ate alone in his homeland. He smiled warmly. He reached back into the bag, pulled out pieces of cake, and offered one to the girls. They spent a pleasant time together sitting in the carriage. Klaus asked if he had heard correctly that Day had hit the king monkey in mid-flight. Karina knew it was hard to believe, but it was true. The guard also told the head of the merchants that the boy had defeated 5 royal monkeys. Clausen couldn't quite believe it, so he asked if the girl might have imagined it. But Karina assured that even during the battle she did not stop watching him. Even with doubts, Vertrump decided to believe her, since with wind magic she could perceive the movements, even outside her visual field. With that, the escort finished her report on what had happened to Dai the night they were attacked by the royal monkeys. Klaus was tense about the situation. The head of the company knew that even Karina would not have been able to resist the monster's fangs. LaGuardia added that Day had used a knife, but that if he had had a sword, he would have defeated 4 monkeys. Klaus deduced that, if so, he didn't know anyone on that continent who could compete with the boy using magic without element. Karina agreed with the head of the company. I had some suspicions. The guard gave his assessment. Dai couldn't control either his sword or his body. He had no combat experience, but he was capable of much more than that. Klaus asked if that meant that the boy was only good with his magic, but Karina didn't know what to answer. The head of the company also drew a conclusion from his observations, saying that Day was also new to trading. But his knowledge was quite close to practice. The escort suggested that it might be because the would-be merchant was a noble from another continent. Closer replied that, if that was the case, it would explain a lot of things. Karina asked what order the head of the company would give her. The strength of the novice trader seemed suspicious to him. The merchant chief decided to comply with Sakura's request, and keep the fact that he was a foreigner a secret. Bertram considered Day a key figure for them. The protagonist had not only saved Alicia, but also helped the company. Karina knew it well. Klaus ordered the guard to continue accompanying the boy, especially in the city of Kram, where the locals might misinterpret his origin. The protector accepted the order. Inside, he noticed that Day was like a hero. She thought of the happy young man with the pie plates in his hands and smiled. After that, Karina returned to the carriage with Sakura and Alicia. Later, the 3 of them went to a clothing store. The boy dressed up in local clothes and asked the girls what they thought of his appearance with the new clothes. Karina gave her assessment. The young man looked like a traveler. Nick Mario. Dai wondered if the clothes fit her. Alicia pointed out that the novice trader had been wearing foreign clothes all that time, which could attract unnecessary attention. Karina supported the sorceress. The main thing was that the clothes fit in with the local environment. The young man asked if he should choose something sober but stylish. The defender looked at the boy sternly, and replied that travelers could not wear such things, and that Day should not stand out. The novice trader accepted his position. The guy muttered that the escort was kinder when she ate delicious sweets, so he got elbowed in the back. The young man chose the clothes that he liked. The protagonist turned to an older saleswoman, calling her little sister, and saying that he would take the clothes she had chosen. The woman blushed when she was called young. The guy kept flattering her, saying that she would be only 40 years older than him, at most. The saleswoman laughed and commented that she had a daughter about Day's age. The protagonist fawned over her, saying that, if he saw mother and daughter together, he would think they were sisters. The compliments took effect. The seller decided to give a discount to Day. There was Abako on the counter. The boy looked in the direction of Karina, and asked her with his gaze if she had done well. The girl felt with her head, giving him an affirmative answer. The novice trader reached into his bag, and, still addressing the woman as a little sister, asked if he could pay with that instead of using silver coins. He took out a high-quality silver foil. When she saw the piece of precious metal, the saleswoman was perplexed. Karina was angry, and Alicia was amazed. The escort immediately intervened, standing in front of the young man, and telling him to wait. Karina paid for Dai's purchases herself. Then he quickly took it out of the store. The saleswoman, confused, asked them to come back soon. The three of them stood in front of the store. The escort yelled at the foreigner for what he had done. The young man justified himself by saying that he only wanted to pay with silver. Karina started massaging her eyebrows, irritated. He accepted that it had been his fault, and that he should have cleared it up sooner. Day proposed to go to the next store, but the protective stopped him. He forbade them to continue because they had to go to the head of the Bertram company first. The young man smiled and did not resist. Karina dragged Sakura by the neck to introduce him to clothes. The protagonist was in front of the head of the merchants, who asked him why he had done that, referring to the incident in the store. Dee just wanted to pay. Karina, the boy and Chloe were inside the tent, while outside Alicia was playing with Nick. Vertrump pointed to the silver bar, and asked if Dad was going to pay with that. He explained that he had not seen silver coins on his continent, and that such plates were used on his land. So he did not understand that it was wrong to pay with one of them. Close wondered how it was possible that the protagonist had not found out about the existence of the coins before they met. While he explained that gap in his knowledge by saying that he had everything he needed saved, so he hadn't had to spend any money. The head of the company accepted the young man's explanation and concluded that he had no local money. And that's exactly why the protagonist needed them. Then she asked Closer if he wanted to buy her something, and emptied her things on the table. The merchant put his hand to his head. Still, he gave some money to the young man, warning him to be careful when he reached Gram. Klaus also advised Dai not to show any objects from his homeland to anyone, so that he would remember that what is normal in his country turns out to be strange in this one. The young man, as they were walking through the village again, asked Karina if she was still angry. The girl, with a clear gesture of anger, replied that she should not be. To Sakura, he apologized for not having consulted with her companion, and asked if there was anything he could do to cheer her up. The defender refused. He said his mood was fine. Day admitted to himself that although he had done this for the purpose of getting to know the world, the situation was entirely his fault. He promised Karina that he would be more careful next time. The companion finally answered him. He assured her that since the boy didn't know anything, it wasn't a big problem, but that next time she should consult him before doing anything. Go accepted Karina's conditions. Mikmajo. The escort turned around and approached the cat. She was touched to think that he also wanted to apologize to her. The girl assured that she was not angry with Mickey, that the only one to blame for everything was his owner. He remembered that the protector had told him not to be angry. After that, Karina's unsheathed sword was placed next to the terrified Dai's head. The novice trader offered sweets to Karina as an apology. The escort, indignant but with flushed cheeks, asked if Sakura really wanted to bribe her. The protagonist hastened to explain that in his land, when one causes annoyance to a dear girl or a friend, chocolate is offered as an apology. Dee knew that he had just lied, but he thought that, if that were true, there would be no problems in the world. Alicia looked at the chocolate bar in her palms, and repeated in a low voice the words dear girl or friend, with a questioning tone. Karina accepted the young man's arguments, and agreed to keep the sweets. The girls tried the candies, and were impressed by their taste. Dale gave a little more to Karina and Alicia. They thanked him for the extra. He thought to himself that it had been easy. At the same time, I was worried. The aspiring merchant apologized to Karina again. She agreed to forgive him on the condition that he would be more careful next time. Dee accepted the condition. The trio, Karina, Alicia and Dai, found themselves on a very busy street. He was surprised to see so many adventurers. The sorceress said it was amazing, considering the village was small. Karina was worried about the number of people. The protagonist felt unfriendly looks on him. The girl noticed it too. Alicia became worried because Day didn't have a gun, and people might find out that the young man worked with the Bertram Company. Karina added that the novice trader looked weak, and came from another country, so everyone would see him as an easy target. The protagonist commented that that was not funny, although he thought to himself that somehow, he had defeated the real monkeys. The novice trader wanted to visit a gun store. The escort did not object, she just reminded him not to look for adventures and to be careful. He also asked Dai to take care of himself. The boy assured her that they could trust him, and that, despite his appearance, he was a fairly peaceful citizen. Karina sighed. He said out loud that he hoped the novice trader had not become too trusting after the fight with the monkeys. As they were talking, the young man pointed his finger and asked who would be stronger, the fighting humans or the Monkey King. The girls were not happy with such a direct question. The boy added that it was just out of curiosity. Karina replied that, in a one-on-one match, the monkey would win. However, adventurers could join, use traps and different strategies. After all, they were human. Dai suggested dropping the subject and heading to the gun store. The manager supported the decision. The three of them entered a gun store. The young man eagerly examined several swords. Karina told him to choose the armor first. She tried on an outfit and asked if it was the right outfit. The swordswoman looked at him and wondered if the chosen armor would not be too light. The young man replied that maybe yes, but that way Nick wouldn't be uncomfortable. Karina noticed that the young man had his priorities poorly distributed. Alicia, on the other hand, considered Dai's concern for her pet kind, and told him so. He was surprised, and asked her if she really thought about it. The sorceress replied that yes. Karina suggested that they stop shopping. They already had magic armor. Then it was decided to buy and sell. Day took a large and tall shield. The swordswoman warned that this type of shield did not match the armor. The sorceress admired the young man's endurance. The protagonist calmly raised to such shields. Karina told her not to carry them on her, but to keep them so as not to attract attention. Then, to his joy, it was the young man's turn to choose a weapon. He wanted to get a long sword, like in fantasy role-playing games. He approached a rack with swords, among which there was a black-hilted one. Day took it. Karina asked him if he knew how to use a long sword. Then the young man admitted that he needed her only to intimidate and that he would simply brandish her. The swordswoman got angry because that wasn't how it worked. Alicia, however, encouraged Sakura by telling her that he was good with guns. The escort explained that that was only because the young man had physical reinforcement and magic armor. The protagonist looked at the sword in his hands and wondered if the sword art with physical reinforcement would be more powerful. He felt that using magic was very profitable. After all, the winner was the one who knew how to control it. Dai reasoned that, if magic was used, one could turn one's power into physical strength and plow a field faster than a normal person. However, magic items could only be used by those who mastered magic, and others ignored them.